Good evening, folks. I think we are live. I've got the go-ahead from the team that we're now streaming live. So welcome. I'm Hugh Elliott. I'm the British Ambassador, and we're here to talk to you today in our latest Facebook live session about questions that you're coming to us with about citizenship, residency, healthcare, and so on here in Spain. Just to introduce the team that's supporting me here today. First, our consul in Malaga, Charmaine. And there is Lorna Getty, our citizens' rights expert, Lorna. And Sarah Owen, who is our healthcare expert, Sarah. And it took quite a lot of effort to work out who was where on the screen to be able to point in the right direction. I don't actually know if I was pointing in the right direction. And that takes me to one of the things which is obviously different about this Facebook Live. It's virtual in that we are all in different places. We have got a fantastic backup team which is making this work. Aran, Debbie, Lucy, thank you very much for what you're doing on that. We're going to try to make this smooth and informative for you as always. Now, we're doing it this week because there's a particular issue which many of you are aware of. You've been asking us questions about, and we know you've been talking about, which is the introduction of the new residency card. We'll come on to that in a moment. And then we will give you a few words of introduction, and then we will open things up for questions. We've had some that have come in advance and so on. We'll, as usual, for those of you who've joined us in the past. So what is this new residency card that's caused a bit of a stir? The Tarjeta de Identidad de Extranjero, or TA. First, I'll pass to my colleagues to say a word or two in a moment, but first to say that the whole process around the TA is very new. It's just been introduced, so we ourselves are learning about it. I'm talking on a regular basis to Spanish ministers who are responsible for its introduction. The team are talking to teams in the Spanish ministry. We're learning about it and we're trying to work with the Spanish all the way through. It's a very collaborative process and we're actually really grateful to the Spanish government for their help in doing this. And also Spain is worth pointing out that Spain is one of the first countries actually to introduce this new residency document, which does show that it's a sign of how much they recognize the importance and how much they value the British community and the number of Brits who are here living in Spain and the importance of making sure that things are properly organized for you. So it's a very positive sign that they've brought in that card. The other thing I just say by way of introduction is that, of course, you're hearing in the news about the negotiations that are taking place between the United Kingdom and the European Union about our future relationship with the EU. And of course, those are very important to establish what our relationship will be at the end of the transition period we are currently in, finishes at the end of this year. But for citizens' rights, for your rights here in Spain, and that's the right to be able to continue to live and work in Spain, for UK state pensioners to have lifelong healthcare as long as you remain living in Spain, and that applies to residents who claim a UK state pension in the future as well. Your pension will continue to be uprated, and you'll still be able to exchange a driving license until the end of 2020 without taking a test. Those rights are all fixed in the withdrawal agreement that was agreed last year and came into force at the end of January. So those rights I've just mentioned are all fixed and they are not in negotiation right now. So I will leave it there by way of introduction, but I sort of sit here in Madrid inevitably because travel around Spain has been very limited recently. But Charmaine, you've been much more on the ground. You've got lots of Brits living in your patch. Charmaine, tell us what it's actually like on the ground. What are you hearing from people on your patch?
Thanks, Hugh. So the first thing that I'd like to say is that it's really good to be here today and to be able to share this information with as many people as we're able to share it with using Facebook Live. I remember, many of you will remember back in 2016, whenever this all kicked off, none of us knew where it was going to end. None of us knew what it was going to mean for us, whether we were going to be able to continue to live in Spain in the way that we do now. One of the first things that we did way back in 2016, and we continue to do now, even though we have different challenges with COVID, so trying to do it virtually. One of the things that we started to do was to try and have conversations with you, the British nationals that live in Spain, because as much as we think we know what the issues might be, there is nothing that can beat actually speaking to people who have those daily concerns. And so in Spain, I think we've done more than 200 outreach events. And admittedly, we may not have been everywhere, but I think that we have been everywhere where there are a significant number of UK nationals resident. For me, the really interesting thing speaking to people now is that the same questions or the same topics are being raised now as were initially raised in 2016. So it would be interesting to see whether people have different questions today. But people have tended to ask about residency. Are they going to be able to continue to live and work and enjoy their lives in Spain as they had planned whenever they first moved to Spain? Healthcare, are they going to be able to have access to the healthcare system in the same way as they envisaged whenever they first arrived? And pensions. There was, for a moment, a real wobble about whether or not pensions would be uprated and whether they would be protected. And I know that as time goes by, there are new issues that arise. And I know that Lorna's going to talk about the TIE, which came as a bit of a, we knew it was going to come, but we didn't expect it to come kind of overnight. So there are all sorts of issues and, that keep coming out and that we have to deal with. But I do think it's worth us reflecting on how successful you have been in telling us what you wanted the government to concentrate on in the negotiations, and the fact that quite a lot of that was tied down in the withdrawal agreement. So as Hugh says, regardless of what happens in this next phase, and regardless of the fact that the transition period ends at the end of December 2020, there are lots of our rights that are already tied down, protected, and that's a real success. So I think we do still have issues that we need to deal with. One that I haven't mentioned is swallows. I'm sure there'll be some questions on swallows. But it's really heartening to know that we've come as far as we have over these past 4 years. We're not quite there yet, but stick with us.
Thanks very much, Charmaine. Thank you. I completely agree with that. I mean, we do have some 360,000 British nationals who do formally have residency here, and we'll explain a bit more about that now. So that's a huge number of people, but it's also a huge number of people who have got, the major issue, which is can you live and continue to live and work here, sorted. Now, coming back to the tarjeta de identidad de extranjero, or extranjería, or Lorna, I keep getting this wrong, Lorna, you'll correct me. Lorna knows all about this, and she's just going to talk us through the very basics at the beginning, because it's a good process, it's a clear process, but it's new, so we need to explain what's involved. Lorna.
Thank you. So you were right with extranjero. It's the tarjeta de identidad de extranjero, or as a lot of people are referring to it, the TIE or the TA. So just for those who perhaps haven't ever heard of this, and I'm sure there will be quite a few people, this is a document that the Spanish government are introducing. It's a residence document specifically for UK nationals living in Spain who fall under the withdrawal agreement. So that's what the document is. It is being introduced as of this week. But a lot of you, as the ambassador's already mentioned, will already have registered, and you'll have a green residency paper certificate, and that might be the A4 size certificate or a smaller credit card sized certificate. So the key thing that I did want to say right up front is that if you are already registered, you already have a green residency paper, that certificate remains valid, not only to prove your proof of residence here in Spain, but also to show proof of your rights under the withdrawal agreement, as the ambassador and Charmaine have already been talking about. So whilst if you're in this position, you have the option to apply for this new residence document, there is no obligation for you to do so. Okay, now there will be people who are watching who perhaps haven't got this green paper residency document, and they do need to apply for, they do need to register with the Spanish authorities. So anyone who is in that position, you do need to take action, and you need to take action as soon as possible. It is an obligation for all UK nationals living in Spain to register. And when you register, you will be issued not with the green bit of paper, but with the TIE. So what I did wanted to say about that process, again, we'll come back to it in lots of the questions, I'm sure, but if you are registering now, the process will look a little bit different from what it did before. It's a two-step process. One step, which is the submission basically of the documentation to show that you meet the residency requirements. And then the second process is actually the obtention of the card itself. So we'll come back to that in the questions. But what I did want to say is that whether you have the green certificate or the TIE card, they are both equally valid in proving your residence and your status and your rights here in Spain under the withdrawal agreement.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Lorna. So the basic message there is the 360,000 people who've got a green residency card, whether it's A4 size or credit card size, your rights are already protected. Now, as we go through it and you learn more about the TA, it's a biometric card. We'll come on to that. You may see there being an advantage in getting one, but you don't need it to protect your rights. That's the really key message, I think, here. And Lorna, please, as always, correct me when I start getting the sorts of things wrong or I'm not quite as precise as I should be on some of this stuff. So just to recap, if any of you are joining us fresh now, I'm Hugh Elliott, I'm the British Ambassador. We've got Charmaine Awin, our consul in Malaga. We've got Lorna Geddy, our citizens' rights expert, and we've got Sarah Owen, our healthcare expert, as part of the team to answer your questions this evening, this week in particular, because we've got, as Lorna was saying, the new TA process. Now, please do, I mean, today's session is a Q&A session, so please do send in your questions. We asked you to send some in advance, and we've had lots. We've actually had hundreds of questions. And what we've tried to do is to group them, if you like, and because they've had quite a few of them had different things in common. So we're trying to answer as many of your doubts as possible, as briskly and crisply as we possibly can by grouping all your different questions. But we'll keep carrying on giving information. This isn't the only chance you've got to get it. We'll keep posting stuff on gov.uk, on our travel advice pages, and so on. Sorry, not travel advice, Living in Spain guide. I was getting that wrong. On the Living in Spain guide. So first question that we've had, this is questions that came in advance. And I think this one, to warn you, Lorna, is going to be for you. And this is from Charmian. Charmian asks whether there are any benefits to changing the green. Well, here we go. Are there any benefits to changing the green certificate for a TA card? A lot of people will be asking that question.
Yeah, so in terms of your rights and proving your status, no. In terms of the green certificate, as we've said, and the new card are going to be equally valid even after the end of the transition period in terms of proving your rights and proving your legal resident status here in Spain. So from that point of view, there's no advantage, if you like, of having one over the other. The Spanish have been quite clear about this in tweets that they've put out this week and on their Moncloa website page, which I'm sure we'll link to after this session. So, so no. What some people may wish to change because they may find it easier, more practical to have the card format rather than carrying around a piece of paper. Charmaine and I have been at numerous outreach events where people have shown us certificates which are a little dog-eared perhaps. So people may wish to change to the card for that reason. But as we said, there's no obligation to, and you're, irrespective of which document you have, they're both equally proof of your rights here in Spain.
So it might be convenient. You can just slot it in your wallet or your purse or what have you, but it's not an absolute requirement. Great, that's really helpful. Thank you. Next question, again, taking 2 or 3 that came in advance to try to group some of the questions in together. This is going to be for you, Sarah. Where's Sarah? Sarah's there. Sarah. Jill asks, what happens to healthcare after the 31st of December? In her case, she's pre-pension age, hoping to be resident before the 31st of December, but worried about costs.
Okay, thanks for your question, Jill. So if you are applying for residency, as you'll probably be aware, you need to provide proof of healthcare cover. And so if you're not working and you're not yet pension age, there are a few options for you. The first one might be that you could access healthcare as a dependent. So if Jill has a spouse who is either working under the Spanish system, claiming a Spanish pension or claiming a UK pension, she would be able to access healthcare on that basis as a dependent. There is also the option of the pay-in scheme, which is called the Convenio Especial. So in order to access this scheme, Jill would need to have been on the Padron for 12 months, so for 1 whole year, and she would need to have documentary proof of that. So we know that some people are registered on the Padron but don't yet have their residency, which is why I mentioned that option. And that option also is a valid one for proof of healthcare for residency applications. The costs of that are around €60 per month for under 65, and then I think it jumps up to about 150 for over 65s. And there's more information on our Healthcare in Spain guide, which we can pop in the comments field below on how to apply for that. And lastly, the final option for Jill would be to apply for private healthcare insurance. But just a quick note on insurance, because we've had a few inquiries about private healthcare insurance and the cover that it needs to provide. It needs to provide the same level of cover that the state healthcare system does. So that means we've had people come to us and say, I've taken my private healthcare insurance policy for my residency application, it was rejected. And that's because either the policy had exemptions in it, or the policy had some parts of it for some treatments that would need to be co-payments would need to be made. So it's really important to check your policy. And if you have any doubts about its validity for the registration process, the best thing to do would be to consult with the police station you're dealing with or Extranjería to see if they would accept that policy that you have.
That's really helpful, Sarah. Can I just ask a small follow-up on that very last point? Is there any way in advance of people being able to go to a private health provider and say to them, you know, we need to make sure that this has a certain level, the same level as the state? Would private healthcare providers understand that, or would that probably not work?
I think many are familiar with this process at the moment. I think it's really important for the person that's applying or contracting that policy to be very, very clear with the person that's selling it to them that they need it to be fully comprehensive with no exemptions, and that it's for purpose of applying for residency.
That's very clear. Thank you. Thanks very much, Sarah. Okay, well, again, for those of you just joining, I'm Hugh Elliott, British Ambassador. We have a team of Charmaine, Lorna and Sarah who are answering your questions about residency, healthcare, citizenship and so on right now. You've got lots of questions, and if I'm sort of looking down at the screen, please forgive me. I've got an iPad here in which the questions are coming flooding in. And as usual, we'll try to group them so that in answering a single question, we answer lots of your questions. But thank you, do keep them coming. And for those that we can't get to cover during the course of this hour, we will try to make sure we post the right information on our Living in Guide subsequently, so that you do get all your questions answered. This is a residency question. Stephen, thanks for your question, Stephen, is looking to obtain residency in September. How long does it take to apply? I guess that's one, I think, for Lorna.
Yeah, we're happy to answer Stephen's question. So if Stephen's arriving in September, he will have to apply for his residency, register with the Spanish authorities via this new system, which has been introduced this week. So it's a two-step system for those who are applying for the first time. The process is, number one, to apply to Extranjería or the immigration office. And there are several ways in which a person can do that. They can either apply for an appointment to go in person with their documents. They can appoint a representative to go in person with their documents, or they can do it online. This is a new provision that the Spanish have put in place with this new system, that there will be the option to submit your documentation online. Now, we believe you would need to have a digital certificate for that, but it is an option perhaps that others would like to take advantage of, because it means you don't have to wait around to get an appointment or be up at 7 a.m. Clicking to try and get one. So the first step, as I say, is submitting the documents through Extranjería. Now, the instructions that have come out recently state that once you've submitted your documents, you will immediately be given a receipt to say that you have submitted your documents, and that receipt will prove your legal status in Spain whilst you're waiting for the immigration office to come back to you with their final decision. We don't know whether if you go in person, the decision will be more or less immediate, as it always has been. But Extranjería, the immigration office, have said that anyone who applies will definitely have a decision within 3 months. But in the meantime, that receipt that they get will be ample proof of their legal residence here in Spain.
So that sounds like quite an important thing. Quite an important thing for peace of mind, for people to know, okay, I've got an official piece of paper that tells me I have registered that I am entitled to this, right?
Absolutely.
And also quite an important thing not to lose, no?
Yeah, so the second step of the process would be taking that receipt and evidence of the fact that you've done the first bit of the process to the National Police. Again, you would need to get an appointment for this. This is where you do have to go in person, and you do need to have an appointment. So you need to go along with that receipt, plus some other documents. I won't go through them all now, but it's not very many. But you will need to pay the fee, as is the case now, and then the police will issue you with the tarjeta, the TIE. So as I say, it's a two-step process. Submit your documents and then get the card. But okay. Stephen arriving in September shouldn't have any problem as long as he starts the process once he arrives.
Okay, that's brilliant. And on the sort of similar lines, Lucy's worried about obtaining the TA if she doesn't arrive for 3 months. What can she do now? Now, my understanding is if she's not resident here, she can't really do anything now. You've got to make sure that you're resident first, and when you fulfill the residency criteria, then you apply for the TA. Is that right, Ron?
Yes, so you do need to be living in Spain to apply for the resident certificate. What I would say is that we know that because of COVID, there are a lot of people who perhaps had planned to move earlier in the year and have had to push that back. And I appreciate perhaps people like Lucy and Stephen are a little bit worried that they're moving or going to be doing this process towards the end of the year. So as we've said, the key thing is that once you are living in Spain, that you start the process and that you get that receipt of saying that you've submitted your documents, and then that will give people peace of mind. Okay,
that's brilliant. Thank you very much. On the same theme, and just sort of wrapping this up a little bit in some ways into another circumstance, Nicola is asking about what the situation is for children under 16 and residency. Do they need to go through the same process? Is there a different process? How does that work, Lorna?
Yeah, so we did ask this of the Spanish authorities, actually, because it was an area we wanted to clarify as well. So glad Nicola asked this question. The Spanish have confirmed that children should also have their own residency document. So if there are people listening who have got themselves sorted, but perhaps have never registered their children, then we would really encourage you to make sure that your children have their own document. An interesting thing about the withdrawal agreement is that it also covers your children, including any children that are born after the end of the transition period. And the Spanish have said that, say somebody was to have a baby next year, there would be from the date of birth, the Spanish would ask that the child is registered within a 3-month period. So yes, children do need to get registered.
Okay, from the very beginning, there is no lower age bracket. Okay.
Not as far as we're aware.
That's very clear. So I'm going to come on to Charmaine, and this is a question from Pat Charmaine, and it's a slightly complicated one. So sorry, got different bits to it. Pat says that he or she, I'm not sure, has a NIE, but not residency, as Pat splits his or her time between the UK and Spain. Is there anything he or she needs to do before the end of the year? And similarly, Jane says she prefers to spend the winter in Tenerife. They've thought about residency, but would prefer to pay tax in the UK. Is there a way of doing this? So here we have this sort of slightly complex mix of tax and residency going on.
Okay, let's take Pat's question first, because that's slightly more straightforward. If Pat has a NIE but is not a resident, the only thing that Pat needs to do is decide whether she wants to be resident in Spain or wishes to continue to be resident in the UK. And I know that for some people that's not as straightforward as it sounds, but actually that is a decision that everybody has to make. Where are you going to be resident? If you really do not see Spain as the place that you are, that is your home and is your permanent, it's your intention to make your permanent home, then you shouldn't register as resident. You should stay resident in the UK. There is probably a sort of question underneath this, which Jane is asking. What if I want to spend large periods of time in Spain, but I don't really necessarily want to be resident in Spain? That's going to be difficult in the future, because as EU nationals, we've had the right to more or less to come and go as we please and to spend as much time as we wanted to in any of the EU countries. As third country nationals, there are a different set of rules. And what we understand to be the situation at the moment is that anybody who is not resident, will only have the right to spend 90 days in any 180-day period visa-free. So the UK is on the visa-free list for the European Union, but that only gives us 90 days. That's 3 months in any 6-month period. That's fine for lots of people, but for lots of other people, particularly the swallows, lots of swallows on my patch in the south of Spain who like to spend the whole of the winter period. So they may not exceed the 6 months, but they don't do 90 days. They do, my maths fails me, they do 5 months, they're not going to be able to do 5 months altogether. You're only going to be able to do 90 in the 180-day period. For Jane, who is thinking about residency but would prefer to continue to pay her tax in the UK, it's worth just clarifying that there is there are two different things. So residency and tax residency, fiscal residency, are not the same thing. It's way beyond my ability to explain in simple terms, and part of that is because everybody's circumstances are slightly different. So if I give you advice now without understanding the entirety of your circumstances, undoubtedly that advice is going to be incorrect. What we suggest to people is that if you are very concerned about this, you take good tax advice on it. What I would like to reassure you, though, is that tax residency and residency are not the same thing. It is technically possible for you to be resident here, but for you to be tax resident somewhere else if you can prove that your centre of vital interest, who would have thought I knew that phrase, that your centre of vital interest is somewhere else, but you need to get good tax advice on that. And I suppose the last thing that I would say in relation to tax is that the UK and Spain do have a bilateral tax agreement, a double taxation agreement. So it does mean that even though sometimes it gets a little bit complicated and you are paying tax in two places, you do have there is the system, the procedure there for you to be able to reclaim that tax.
Yeah, so you're not paying tax twice. You're not paying tax twice on the same money, basically. But I think the main point, I think, from our point of view is what you said, Charmaine, that residency that we're talking about, I'll come into that in a thing, and tax residency are different things. And if you've got tax questions, you must take, or we recommend that you take professional advice from a tax advisor, because we are not qualified tax advisors. And so we don't try and advise you, because we try not to pretend we know things that we don't. So just if you're joining us, I want to reiterate one really important point that we've covered a few times. Forgive me if you're hearing this yet again, but this week the new Tarjeta de Identidad de Extranjero, I got this right, Lorna, has been introduced, and we've talked quite a lot about it, but just to let you know that if you've already got a green residency card, whether it's a credit card size or an A4 size green residency certificate, it remains valid in demonstrating your rights under the withdrawal agreement. So you have the option of changing it for a TA. You do not have to change it for a TA. So you don't need to rush off and ask for a new appointment if you have that card, or that green certificate. You're okay. You've got time to look and see whether that might be beneficial to swap it, but you do not need to go and ask for an appointment and swap it right now. And indeed, if you all did it, that would be 360,000 people, which will completely swamp the system and stop anybody from getting one, probably, because it would gum it up completely. So please, our recommendation would probably be don't try and do that absolutely immediately. Now, the questions are coming in thick and fast. So let me keep going here. Well, this is, I was talking about somebody losing a certificate. I think this is probably for you, Lorna. Chris has lost his NIE paperwork. What's he need to do?
Yeah, so if Chris, the slight issue here is that it's really important to understand what we're talking about when Chris mentions NIE, because the green certificate that you were just referring to is the residency certificate, but it is possible for people to have a NIE, which is a number, basically your foreigner's number here in Spain, but not be registered as a resident. So some people might have a NIE on a white bit of paper, and that is proof of their number, but is not a residency certificate. So it depends a little bit here on exactly what Chris has lost. Perhaps he's lost his white bit of paper with the NIE on it, or he's referring to the green certificate. So if Chris has lost his green certificate, then he will need to apply for another one, and he should make an appointment with the Spanish. Now, if it was stolen, then the Spanish will probably ask for a police report to show that that has been stolen. So I would recommend that he takes that step in case that is what's happened. But if he hasn't got a certificate, doesn't know, or doesn't just know where it is, then we would advise that he makes an appointment in order to get a new one.
Okay, thank you very much, Lorna. We have a question from Linda, who's asking if the financial requirements from residency have changed. I imagine, Linda, that you mean with the new tarjeta. The answer is no in terms of financial requirements. Isn't that right, Lorna? It's the same as always. There's not any new.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the requirements that people are being asked to meet to get the new tarjeta, the new TIE, are exactly the same as the requirements that people had to meet in order to get the green certificate. So there's been a bit of confusion about this, because the TA or TIE is something that third country nationals also have here in Spain. And I think therefore people have been thinking, because the process has changed a little bit, because it's called a TIE, perhaps that means that we now have to meet third country national requirements. That's not the case. We want to be really emphatic about that, the only requirements that people are being asked to meet are those set by EU law. So there's no change to the financial requirements. No.
Thanks very much, Lorna. I should say some of these answers are a bit technical and complicated. If you don't get it first time round, you will be able to access this video. And if you have great problems sleeping, you can watch it all over again as many times as you like. But more seriously, these you can always go back and check again exactly what we're saying. We're trying to be precise. If we get anything wrong on it, we will absolutely correct. But what we're saying is right. And I say that because Candy, thank you for your comment. You're a bit skeptical about whether, I gather from your question, about whether your rights are really protected and could it change? And the answer is yes and no. And there is a great big wodge of nearly 600 pages of treaty, a large part of which are about citizens' rights. I'm looking around my desk here, which to see if I've got a copy of it standing here. I don't see it, but it's a bit of a mess anyway. Great. Well, brilliant, Lorna, thank you. So yes, this won't change. I mean, the processes, we're updating you on the processes for making sure that you assert those rights and you have the right documentation, but the rights are protected in that treaty that was signed in October last year and came into force at the end of January this year. That's fixed. It's international law, and that remains in place. And nobody has any wish to change it either. Not the UK, not Spain, and we'd have to do a new treaty if we wanted to. We don't want to. The treaty's in place. Your rights are okay. Tell me if you still don't believe me, Candy. Send a message in, and I'll try and sort of see if I can be more convincing. But that's my best effort at being as convincing as I can, because it's the situation. Now, I've got a question. This is probably coming your way, Charmaine. I think you're getting away lightly on the healthcare side here, Sarah. Charmaine, David says, can you please comment on retired people who are UK resident but have property in Spain? What will the situation be after Brexit? And I think you've probably covered a little bit of that with your comment about the 90-day rule. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
Only to say that nothing will change for you. So other than the length of time that you'd be allowed to come, there would be no change at all. So lots of people have asked me, will I still be able to own a property? Will it change my, my right to own a property? There will be no change. The one thing that and I don't know whether Lorna might be able to comment on this, or whether I'm straying into territory that's not really ours, is that there may be, I think, a difference in the rate on which your property tax. Does that sound right, Lorna?
Yeah, I think we need to confirm 100%, but that it is possible that that might change for people who perhaps sell a property after the end of the transition period and the tax. But as you said, we're not tax experts, so unfortunately we can't go into much detail. I did wonder whether maybe on people who perhaps own property and come to visit, Sarah might want to say something about the European Health Insurance Card and how people perhaps access healthcare after the end of this year.
No problem. So at the moment, to put out the first reassurance message that the European Health Insurance Card, also known as the EHIC, is there's no change to accessing healthcare through that card for the remainder of the year. So that card is valid for use until the 31st of December of this year. After that point, that's part of what we call the future relationship, and it's part of ongoing negotiations. So I'm not able to comment at this stage whether that will be a scheme that's able to continue or not for people who are visiting. What I will say is that for those who perhaps, we had this query recently in an event, a virtual event in the Canaries, for those people that come to spend the winter in Spain and perhaps arrive in December and will find themselves crossing over that transition period time and into the next year, the withdrawal agreement will protect those people who are temporarily in Spain. So they'll be able to use their EHIC card for the remainder of their stay in Spain until they return back to the UK.
That's great. That's really helpful, because you're right. We've had lots of questions about EHIC cards. Let's switch to driving licenses. So I'm not sure who our driving license expert is here. Charmaine, fantastic. So Colin asks if the driving license exchange needs to be done by 31st of December or just the application to do so. Baz wants to know if the deadline will be extended. I think the best I can answer that one, Baz, the answer is no. To the best of our knowledge, it won't. If that changes, we'll let you know. And still on driving licenses, people are generally concerned about whether they need their residency document, the fact that they need their residency document in order to exchange their driving license, and so whether they'll have time before the end of the year to do all of this. Charmaine, can you help on that?
When I put my hand up to say I was the expert, it was before you said expert. Anyway, I'll so yes, people do need to apply to do the exchange of their driving licence before the 31st of December. The reasoning behind that...
To clarify that, sorry to cut across, Charmaine. The question was specifically, do you need to apply before the 31st or get it?
You need to have started the process, so you need to have submitted your request. Yeah.
Okay, great. And that answers that specific question. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think there was a kind of follow-on question to that, which was, do you need your residency document in order to do that? And the answer is yes, you do. And then the next question, which is, are you going to have enough time if you start now? Yes. So even though, and I'm still straying into Lorna's territory here, even though the Spanish government are saying that they reserve the right to take up to 3 months to deal with your residency application, the first bit of your residency application, it is up to 3 months. It is quite likely that people's applications will be maybe turned around in under 3 months. Yeah. But it does begin to shine a light on the importance of people getting all of their ducks in a row, because you can't get your driving licence exchanged until you've done the residencia. You can't do the residencia until you've got your healthcare sorted out. I know that lots of people that will be listening in will be bored of hearing us say this, but it probably is worth just repeating. It's really important that people begin the process as soon as they possibly can if they haven't started the process, because there may be hiccups along the way and you want to buy yourselves as much time as you can. I think it was Baz who was asking about extending the the length of time that people will be allowed to apply for driving licenses. It's not as simple as people just not wanting to do it and everybody being awkward about it. It's for a very simple reason, which is that in order for us to do the straightforward exchange of driving licenses, the Spanish have to be able to access the information that the UK DVLA has, so that they can be absolutely certain that your driving licence is still a valid driving licence. And once the transition period ends, we are not clear as yet that we will be sharing the same information. And therefore, that's the reason why the 31st of December is absolutely key.
So that's very clear. We need to, if you need to start the process, you need to get organised and follow the sequence that that Charmaine's described. There's an issue here, which we've got quite a few questions coming in fact, lots of people who are saying that they're trying really hard to get appointments, but there don't seem to be any available to register for the first time. Can we advise what they should do? I know there has been if you like, a pause in the system. Obviously, it's been disrupted by COVID, like so many other things, but also there's been a pause because Spain is now introducing the new TA. The system sort of stopped and is now starting again. Lorna, I know we're talking to the government about exactly this at the moment, and even this week there are conversations happening, but is there anything you can, and we'll update you folks, but is there anything you can say right now?
Yeah, so as we said at the very beginning, this is still a very new process, and the green certificates were still being issued up until I think it was Wednesday of last week. So there has needed to be a little bit of time within the Spanish system for them to get themselves set up in order to offer appointments for the new TIE. So I actually had a look online earlier this week and again today, and I've already seen that in a couple of places, at Almeria, for example, Alicante, the Balearic Islands, the option to start the process has now become available today, when perhaps it wasn't available earlier this week.
So it's moving this week.
Things are moving. So in a lot of places, as we mentioned at the beginning, the appointment that you need to apply for depends on your circumstances, whether you already have the green certificate, in which case you need to use the option which is under the police. And again, we can maybe provide a bit more information in a subsequent post, but there will be a specific option if you already have the green certificate. If you don't have a certificate already, there is a different option, and this is where officers are going to be doing things perhaps slightly differently, depending on where you are. So for example, in Alicante and Almeria, the option appears as trámite, I have it written here, trámite para la documentación de nacionales del Reino Unido, brackets Brexit. Now in Malaga, there is a message saying they will not be giving appointments via an online system, and that they're asking people to phone for an appointment. Okay. So we'll put the link to the
system are organising themselves in different ways, and the advice to you folks is read the small print when you get into the system. Yeah, exactly.
So we'll put the link to the system, but then you need to choose the province that you are applying in, and then read the information that is there.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Thanks very much. Folks, that's really helpful. Lots of questions coming in. Sarah, you've been getting away far too lightly here. We're getting lots of questions apparently about the Convenio Especial. How do you apply? And apparently, people are saying that in Malaga, Charmaine, you made about this, you need to have residency rather than the padron. Can you advise? And I just like to say we've got about 15 minutes left. I've got a lot of questions. So what we can try to do is we'll try to keep the answers sort of as crisp as we can and crack through and answer as many of the things you're throwing at us as possible.
No problem. I'll be brief. Basically, every region has a slightly different approach for how you can apply for the Convenio Especial. So perhaps I think probably the best thing to do is to either look at our Healthcare in Spain guide via the Living In guide, or if you want to pop your region in the comments field below, and I can get back to you at a later stage with a link to your specific region to say where you can get the application process information from.
That's brilliant, Sarah. And just to signpost you properly there, the Living In guide, you all, I hope, know about the Living In guides. Put Living in Spain into Google, you will get directed to our Living In guides. And within that, under healthcare, there is a link to the healthcare specific section. That's right, isn't it, Sarah?
That's right.
Okay, so that's what you need to do to find out more about that. We have a question about the TA and the ability to travel. And Matthew's asking, will we be able to travel freely in the EU with the TA card. And Joe wants to know if the TA will be accepted as ID instead of a passport. That feels like a Lorna question to me, because I'm just thinking I'm not totally sure myself of the answer to that one. I think I know it, but Lorna.
Yeah, so to answer the first question, you can't travel on a TIE. You still need to have a passport. Your passport is your valid travel document. That said, if you are traveling around either the Schengen area or outside the Schengen area, then we do recommend that you carry either your green paper residency certificate or the new TIE with you, because as of the beginning of next year onwards, that will be helpful in terms of at the border, showing that you are actually re-entering Spain as a resident rather than a visitor.
Yeah, which people haven't had to do or think about up to now. But for example, you know, things happen, and during the pandemic, folks, what happened was that when Spain only allowed people to come back into Spain who were resident, obviously if you weren't able to prove that, then you could have had difficulties. And we know that several people, many people did. And so this is just an easy way of making sure that you don't have any sort of difficulties of proving your residence, isn't that? That's basically what that's about.
Yeah. Just on the second question, for foreign nationals in Spain, my understanding is that your passport or your national ID card, now in the UK we don't have them, but for us our passports remain our identity document rather than the TIE. So that's my understanding. I would always ensure you have your passport.
Thank you. And Lorna, we're getting lots of questions now about, and I know you touched on this, but specifically about documentation and income needed for TA applications. So perhaps it's worth just spelling that out if you could, for people to help people understand that.
Yeah, so so part of the residence process is proving that you have the right to residency and you meet the requirements that are set by the EU. And one of those requirements is that if you are, that you prove that you are either working here, that you are a student here, or if you're in receipt of a pension, or perhaps, and I expect this is where the questions are coming from, there are people who are not really into any of those categories, and they therefore need to prove that they are self-sufficient and they have sufficient funds for them and any dependent family members. Now, according to law, there is no fixed amount. The person on the desk needs to take into account your full circumstances. So what we would advise is that if you perhaps have savings, that you take along evidence of that, but also evidence of things that you also have assets in your name, or that the fact you own your house rather than you're renting, things that will prove that you are on a stable financial footing as a resident here in Spain. Now, we know that in certain areas, particularly Alicante, people have been turned away because they perhaps haven't managed to prove that they've got a certain amount in the bank. Now, this is something that we are raising with the Spanish authorities and we're keeping a really close eye on. But if that is your position, we do encourage you to apply to take as much documentation as possible. And it is something that we will keep an eye on. Don't wait because you're a bit worried about whether you meet the requirements or not. Take as much documentation as you can, because you may find that that is sufficient.
Thank you very much. I hope that's clear, and if it's not, I'm sure you'll let us know in your questions if there are any other bits and pieces there. There are a few questions on digital certificates and submitting TA applications online. Rona is asking, can a person with a digital certificate submit the application documents on behalf of an applicant?
So I have to admit, we don't know. That the option to apply online will certainly be available. Whether a representative can do it online on your behalf, to me, it's not 100% clear. What we should say is that the Spanish government are planning to provide more information. They're planning a frequently asked questions document and a bit of a guide. That information has not been published yet, but hopefully that might answer this type of question. So as and when we have it, we'll update our Living In guide. So another plug for signing up for email alerts for our Living In guide if you haven't done so already, because this is the kind of detail which we're waiting to receive.
Yes, thanks very much. And as we said, for those of you who didn't join us at the beginning, I saw that, Charmaine, I'll come to you just a tick. People who didn't join us at the beginning, we will be, this is a new process, it's a new system. We are talking, I spoke today to the Spanish minister responsible for implementing it. I will be seeing her again later this week or early next week. Our teams are talking to each other because there are a lot of little detail points like this that we need to make sure we understand and get you the information about. So it's a particularly important point to sign up to those guys, and we will keep them updated, and we will keep telling you and answering your questions about it. Sorry, Charmaine, please go ahead.
No, not at all. It's just to sort of reiterate really what Lorna has said already, which is this is early days and things are coming out little by little. It just so happens that today we've had information from Extranjería in Malaga, and it may well be that Malaga is operating differently from other parts of the country, who knows? But in Malaga, for instance, they have confirmed that other people, including your family and friends, can submit your documents on your behalf. And I suspect that the submission of documents bit, there will probably be a degree of flexibility on that, but you will have to still go and collect your own, you know, the second part. You will have to do that yourself in person. As I say, that is just Malaga, and we know that in the past things have varied across the comunidades autónomas and even between provinces.
Right, that's really, really helpful. Thank you. Paul and others are asking, what happens if they aren't living here by the 31st of December? How difficult would it be to apply for residency next year? Well, you have to, I can answer that myself. You will have to apply this year for residency. You have up until the 31st of December to apply for residency, and you should not leave it till next year. If you want to move to Spain next year, you are subject to a different regime, and you will be treated as a third country national, and there are whole different procedures around that. You will not have the rights that we talked about under the withdrawal agreement. Is that anything you want to add to that, Lorna?
No, that's absolutely right. Just to say that what those requirements will be, we're not yet in a position to confirm, because as we've already mentioned, future relationship discussions are ongoing. So again, people in that position might find it helpful to sign up for email alerts for the Living In Guide. Brilliant.
Thank you very much. Anna is asking about dual nationality. Is that possible here? Now, who wants to go? Who wants to go? This is an old favourite of ours, because the answer's slightly tricky. I'll start. Tell you what, shall I start, and then feel free to come in and correct me, folks. So the answer is that dual nationality is technically possible. A lot of people say that Spain does not allow dual nationality. That is not the case. However, if you have Spanish nationality, Spain effectively treats you as a Spanish national, and they are blind to your other nationality. If you seek Spanish nationality and you meet the criteria for Spanish nationality, and therefore you take it on, you will be asked to renounce your other nationalities, but nobody goes away and checks whether you've actually done it. What actually happens is that Spain becomes blind to something else, and in the eyes of the law in Spain, you become Spanish. And that's the simple answer to the question, I think. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm trying to work out for the expressions on the screen whether I've sort of got this right or not. Who wants to go? Go for it, Lorna. Thank you.
Just to say, for exactly, the UK and Spain look at dual nationality differently. So the UK, there's no problem with having another nationality, but as you've mentioned, that here in Spain, the Spanish would only recognize you as Spanish. Now, a potential follow-on question from that is, well, what happens if I'm in that position and I want to evidence that I fall under the withdrawal agreement? Because here in Spain, you'd be seen as Spanish and you wouldn't have the TIE, you'd be given a Spanish DNI, the DNI. The answer is we don't know. It's another one of those questions that we have to find out. So what I would say, though, is the withdrawal agreement protects your rights and your rights here in Spain. So taking out dual nationality doesn't necessarily mean that you will have more rights in Spain than you would otherwise do. But for some people who perhaps may see it in their interest because of their personal circumstances and their future plans, they may wish to do so. And as you say, they need to be conscious of the fact that in Spain, they'd only be seen as Spanish. I don't know, Charmaine, whether you've got something else to add.
Yeah, it's just two other things that I would add. One is that if you take out Spanish nationality, you are obliged to use it. And I think they're quite clear that if you're not using it, it will be, they reserve the right to withdraw your Spanish nationality. Yeah. And the second thing, and maybe people wouldn't be upset about this, but is to just emphasise what it means by when you're in Spain, you will be Spanish. And this is coming at it really from a very consular perspective. So if you are in Spain and you take out Spanish nationality, you will be treated as a Spanish national. And in, for instance, the circumstances of you being arrested, you will not have access to British consular assistance because in the eyes of the Spanish, you are Spanish.
That's
Lots
really
of people are not very worried about that, but I just want to let you know in case you would miss us.
Thank you. Thanks very much. We're going to have to wrap up soon. I see that the clock's moving on, but a couple of questions coming in. Simon and others are asking if you lose your if you lose your residency after an extended period of absence, and the answer is yes. How long is it, Lorna?
Yeah, so this depends on how long you were resident before you left. So if you have been resident here for less than 5 years, you're allowed absences of up to 6 months in any 1 year, unless there are exceptional circumstances, in which case an absence of up to a year may be allowed, but that would, need to be exceptional circumstances. If you have been resident here for more than 5 years, you have permanent residence rights. And this is actually something that changes under the withdrawal agreement, actually in our favour. So those who have permanent residence rights will be allowed absences of up to 5 years without losing their rights to residence and under the withdrawal agreement here in Spain. So anyone watching who perhaps has children that they think might go away to university and study a degree, if those children have permanent residence rights here in Spain, then they can be absent for up to 5 years, come back and still be considered resident and under the withdrawal agreement here in Spain.
That is very clear. Thanks very much. People are asking when the TA is going to be dated from, when you first got residency or when you get the new card. So I think it's, will you still be able to apply for permanent residency with the TA? Will that affect your sort of that length of time that you've just been talking about there, Lorna?
Yeah, so we're yet to see, to be honest, I don't know exactly what's going to be put on the card, whether the date of your green certificate will automatically put on the card. But what the instructions do tell us, what the latest information from the Spanish does tell us, is that you will be issued with a card. So a little bit complicated, I'll be as succinct as I can. If you've been here less than 5 years, you'll be issued with a TA for 5 years. It will have a validity period of 5 years, but perhaps you've already been resident here for 2 years, in which case, although your card will be valid for 5 years, the instructions are very clear that when you reach your total number of 5 years, so in this case, someone does another 3 years, that at that point, they can change their TA for the long-term TA, which is valid for 10 years, even though their original document hasn't expired. So I hope I've explained that clearly. So your previous years of residence are not lost. I think that's the most important thing. So irrespective of what it actually ends up saying on the card, your previous years of residence are not lost. And once you've done 5 full years, you can apply for the TA, which is valid for 10 years. And then it just automatically renews after that. Okay,
thanks very much. So it takes a little bit of thinking through and working out what it is, but there is a clear answer to that question. Thank you. So I'm looking at the time. We've still got questions coming in. So if you folks, my team, I'm talking to my team here on the screen, if you're happy for us to go on for 5 or 10 minutes overrun to cover more, is that okay? That's good? Okay, so we will overrun a little bit and we will wrap this up. Instead of at 8, we'll wrap it up at 8:10 just to cover a few more bits and pieces. And one of them is on pensions. And Felicity has got a question on pension contributions. She's due to retire in 2021 and has been told that Britain will no longer count the years she's contributed in Spain when calculating her pension. Is that correct?
No, it's not. So if you're protected under the withdrawal agreement, all of your contributions that you've made in the European Union continue to be aggregated. So they continue to count towards your final pension entitlement. So the short answer is that that's not true. Yeah, as long as you've paid anywhere, even if you've worked part of your working life in the UK, some of it in Germany, some of it in Spain, you can bring it all together so that you're entitled to what is the maximum, the maximum amount that you'd be entitled to.
That's very clear. We are getting, of course, people are sort of joining and dipping in and out of this, and some of the people who've joined us a bit later missed what you said earlier about the situation for swallows, Charmaine. So while you're on mic, as it were, do you think you could just give a recap for the implications for swallows of the end of the transition period?
So essentially to say that swallows, we continue to get a lot of questions because Spain is one of those countries where lots of people either have a second home or choose to come and spend their winters, and traditionally have spent maybe 4 or 5 months at a time, which they've been allowed to do because that is under the 183 days, and so it doesn't affect their tax liability at all. Under the new rules, it is really clear at the moment that that the UK is on the EU's visa-free list. The good news means that we are entitled, we think that we will be entitled to spend 90 in any 180-day period without the need to ask for permission. Yeah, no visa requirements at all. So that's the good news, and it's good news for most people. It's slightly unsettling for people who are swallows, who still only want to do under 180 days, but they want to do them in one block, and that will not be allowed. Yeah. People have asked, is there likely to be another visa that you're going to be able to apply for? At the moment, we don't know. Yeah. We have flagged that to the Spanish. The Spanish are very aware of this. They are very aware of the fact that this affects up to 240,000 Brits a year who come as swallows to Spain. And clearly they make a significant contribution to the economy of Spain. So I think it's probably not us being unduly optimistic to say that the Spanish will be looking at this, but at this moment in time, all that we can say to you is it's 90 in 180 days.
Yeah. Yes, thanks very much, Charmaine. I mean, you and I have raised this on trips together with Spanish authorities, and I have, wherever I've been actually around Spain where there are British residents, I have raised this. At a local level, the Spanish authorities are very understanding. They completely see the point you've made there, Charmaine, that people contribute to the economy and so on. But there's a reality here, which is that the Schengen rules state that there is a limit of 90 and 180 days, and Spain is part of the Schengen free movement area of 27, I think, countries, 26 in Europe. And so it would take a special measure for Spain to introduce a special regime for Brits to allow Brits to do something different, and that could raise issues of fairness with other countries for them. So it's not straightforward, even if local government want to do it. The messages we're getting is not straightforward. So what I say is plan on the basis of 90 and 180. We know it matters, and there are significant numbers of you who want to do more. We will continue to raise it. I will continue to raise it, but it is not a given at all that will change. Okay. Thank you very much. Now, a couple on healthcare. So Sarah, Lorraine has an S1 and is awaiting residency. She wants to know if her S1 will run out.
Yeah, the short answer is no, the S1 form won't run out. So once she's able to get an appointment, then she can go ahead and register that form with the INSS. Brilliant,
very clear and reassuring too. Thank you. And B wants to know if there are financial requirements for those swapping from a green certificate to a TA. And I think it's a simple fee for getting the card, isn't it? 22 euros or something. Remind me, Lorna, I've forgotten. I should know.
Yeah, so there is a fee. I'm not entirely sure. I've kind of been told between 15 and 22. It might depend on exactly your circumstance and the rest, but we will find that out, I'm sure, and we will publicise it. So yes, you do have to pay a tax, a fee, which is what we've always had to do. But in terms of the financial requirements, just repeating a point that we covered a bit earlier, in terms of how much money you need to have and are the requirements changing on that, the answer is no. We're still under the same requirements that we always have been.
So if you've met the, sorry to cut across, if you've met the requirements to get your green certificate, the only extra financial cost of getting a TA is a small sort of small two-figure sum to be finally determined. Yeah.
Sorry, yes. So the swap for the card, from the instructions, it doesn't look like you have to provide proof of income or proof of healthcare again. If you've already got the green certificate, to swap it. If you want to move from a temporary green certificate to a permanent one, there is a note in the instructions which says that they might validate your continuous residence. Now, we don't exactly know how they will do that, but as and when we have more information on that, we'll let you know. But in theory, it looks like it should be more or less a straight swap without having to show financial or healthcare requirements again.
Brilliant. Okay, well, look, thank you very much. I think that I'm going to bring this to a close because I said we wrap up at 10 past, and that'll give me 2 or 3 minutes just to finish off, looking at the time here. I'm told that we have had quite a lot of people watching. We've had dozens and dozens of questions. We know we won't have managed to answer all your questions. We will go through them, and those that we haven't answered sort of substantively in the conversations we've had and the various different ones. It might have been somebody else asking your question. If we haven't answered that, we will make sure that we post answers so that you've got everything that you need once we've finished. There are quite a lot of issues, small issues about exactly how this is going to work, which we will need to continue to find out, and we'll bring information to you about that. So watch this space, Living In Guides, sign up to the Living In Guides and sign up for updates on Living in Spain. Google Living in Spain, sign up for updates. It's the best way of staying up to date and getting the very latest on all these little questions that or some not so little questions that are coming in. The video will be available on Facebook to watch afterwards, as I said. So fantastic cure for insomnia. Can't say we don't help out here. From British Embassy and Consulates, provide all sorts of services. And I think just to reiterate the key 2 or 3 messages we started with. First of all, your rights are protected. If you are currently living in Spain, your rights are protected by the withdrawal agreement, or if you want to come to Spain to become resident in Spain before the end of the year, you still can. Those rights are fully protected. The process for doing so has shifted in that there is a new card you will get if you apply for residency. It's called the TA, and I won't try and spell it out because although I can speak Spanish, my tongue gets in a knot over it. That TA will be a small plastic biometric credit card sized identity document. If you already have a green certificate, be it credit card size or A4 size, you do not need to swap it for a TA. The green certificate remains valid, but, and this is where you'll need to wind back to earlier in the show to find out there may be some marginal advantages in swapping for a TA. You don't have to do it. You don't have to do it now. Don't rush to do it because you'll gum the whole Spanish system up if all 360,000 Brits do it. So I think unless my colleagues want to add anything at the end, any things I've missed, any things you particularly want to emphasize, I'm not seeing answers. Well, thank you very much for bearing with us. I hope this has been useful. I hope we've been able to answer your questions. I'd like to say a big thank you to Charmaine and Lorna and Sarah. I don't know where you are on the screen now because it's all shifted, so I'm not going to try and do that clever thing. But thank you very much for your expertise and dedication on all of this. It really is brilliant. I'm very lucky to have a team as good as you. I'm also very lucky to have the behind the scenes team of Aran, our digital whiz, who has made this happen, and Debbie and Lucy, who have been helping corral the dozens and dozens of questions you've got. We've had nearly 1,000 people watching this live right now, so we know there's a fair bit of interest, and we'll keep you informed. Thanks very much.